what are the signs that like a 6102 attack is in the pipeline? Like, what are some things that, your government could say or do or not do where you should be like, oh, I need to start paying attention?
Well, I think if you live under government, which is everybody, then you should already be paying attention because
Yeah.
like I talked about this in like our in Bitcoin. Well, we do a monthly Bitcoin for Beginners webinar, and one of the things I talk about is I contrast Bitcoin to fiat currency, and they have completely different governance systems. Which governance, doesn't sound sexy, but basically it's like who makes the rules. And with
Yeah.
our regular government, it's just like whoever's in charge. It's a person. And that person could be elected. Person could not be elected. That person could wake up and have a different attitude one day and just read something that's not true and just make that's the decision. And like people are fickle. You don't want to trust your life in the hands of man. It's much better to trust your life in the hands of math, especially transparent math that
Yeah.
everyone can proofread, which is what Bitcoin is. So
Yeah.
yeah. I would just say like if you have a government, eventually they're going to want to take Bitcoin because they don't have enough and they don't realize how valuable it is yet. And when they do, they're going to be like, oh shoot, we don't have enough. We need to get some by legal means, and then they'll just create new legal means.
Keep 'em cold till I'm old. I don't plan to blow my load. Wallet so blue, if you know, you know. It's better than bonds, better than gold. Finna reap up what I sow. Fit money can't keep up, it gets sold. How many times you been told? DCA's the way to go. Higher highs, higher lows. Every year my network grows. Every day my network grows. Running relays, running nodes. Yeah. Dollar a day's a minimum. Stats, zap sats. Any fear I get, I'm flipping them.
Konrad Fitzpatrick. Can you
Thank you so much
please?
for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Gosh, yes. I am Konrad Fitzpatrick. I'm the community manager at Bitcoin Well. I've been with Bitcoin Well for a number of years, in Bitcoin for a number of years. Loving it. Self-custody is the way to go because Bitcoin is already designed perfectly. Thank you so much for having me, Saida.
It's my pleasure. I had Adam, I think it was in January, which was a pleasure. And we've been in communication because I do have a Bitcoin Well referral link. And I was going through the Bitcoin Well website, and I saw that you have a background in economics. That's your like formal training. So I thought, I always enjoy speaking to people who are trained formally in economics and asking them, what like how their Bitcoin journey went and why they converted from, I'm guessing it's like Keynesian economics, why you jumped onto Bitcoin, like what happened?
Well, gosh, it's so funny. I was very fortunate to be born into like a pretty politically aware household. My mom was from communist Poland. My dad had studied like communism a lot. In the post World War II era, was a film writer, was making movies about communism. So I was
Your
very much
dad was?
yeah. So I was very much
Wow.
aware of like, hey, like communism and like the seizure of private property is like leads to a lot of like corruption and obviously like deterioration of human rights and human well-being. Private property I felt was like very important from a very early age. So I was like, where do taxes kind of come in? That's kind of like my philosophical question. Basically led me to study economics. And as I'm getting ready to do that, it was U of T's economics program, which is
Yeah.
pretty great for driving folks into the central banking system. And my neighbor was like, you're gonna do all this Keynesian stuff, like you don't even know how it's all brainwashing. And I'm like, you're a conspiracy theorist. No way that's true. And then I finished university and I'm like, oh my God, that was all to make me think the way they want me to think. Like they need money printing and they're just teaching me how to print money. Like there's no Austrian economics being considered there at all. And when I'm graduating in 2017, which is obviously like when crypto's massive moves up, I hadn't really differentiated Bitcoin from crypto. I hadn't had that philosophical understanding.
Yeah.
Me, it was just like they were stocks and they were very volatile.
Yeah.
As someone who was interested in stock trading, this seemed like more exciting. I was like, oh, I can sleep, I can stay up late and keep trading. Like this is ideal. One cycle goes away. I'm hired as a trader for like a small hedge fund, and I'm basically researching. I'm like, why is Bitcoin succeeding so much in this bear market? Other coins are kind of dropping like 90+%, and then I realized about like, oh, like Bitcoin's not going anywhere. It has this incredibly robust mining system. It has economic activity outside the blockchain that's so superior to any other cryptocurrency that it basically means that like Bitcoin's just going to win. Like there's so much capital being invested in the miner space. I was like, oh, like Bitcoin is unstoppable. There's so much money being invested in Bitcoin that no one's really talking about. And like ASICs are always going to keep churning out unused energy or inefficient energy into Bitcoin. So like I was really hooked then. It was still kind of work designing a cryptocurrency at that time. It was a real estate. It was a customizable. It was basically a fully customizable REIT because real estate investment token. REITs have like fixed real estate allocations. This allowed you to have a fully customizable real estate portfolio based on the basket of properties that we had and we're adding. So it was kind of interesting, like a kind of like fun financial exercise. But in the end of the day, like being built on an Ethereum just meant that we were fully compromised in our design from the get-go. And I wanted to build on Bitcoin, but in 2018-19, that wasn't something that was really feasible. Like we were using properties as NFTs to make them unique investable assets that were transparent. So it was like it's supposed to be a fairly novel, especially at that time, no one was using NFTs for anything really. So we were trying to use it for like a serious use case. And then if we probably waited like a year or two, we probably would have caught that whole NFT craze. But like, I mean, we were just trying to make a legit investment asset. We weren't trying to make some sort of like gimmicky thing. It was targeted for accredited investors at first. So that was kind of my long-winded way to say was I went into traditional finance, aiming to be a central banker, was interested in just trade finance and kind of how cryptocurrency mirrored that for a while. Wanted to build a project, and during that research process, ultimately ended up discovering that Bitcoin's already the best asset. It's the best asset. Like it's the only thing we really need. So, and all these other cryptocurrencies are kind of just a waste, or dare I say, a scam.
Dare you? Dare I say a scam too?
Ooh.
Yeah. So your neighbor also used the word Keynesian economics.
Yeah.
What kind of neighborhood did you grow into? Your dad making films on communism, your neighbors speaking like this? Like, it sounds like you actually had a head start.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I would have a head start because, like, I mean, I'm fully into Bitcoin now. I feel like most people, we're still so early to Bitcoin. Like,
Yeah, we are.
you can walk up and down the street and say, hey, like, you know, I need $5 in cash. Can I give you $10 in Bitcoin? And most people were like, oh, sounds like a scam, right? We're still so early to it. And yeah, I was definitely very fortunate. Not only was like my neighbor kind of like talking about Keynesianism, but he was basically talking about how fiat currency is a scam. Like he was a gold bug, like basically gold bugs are precursors of Bitcoiners, right?
Yeah.
And he still doesn't really believe Bitcoin. He still wants gold. He believes in that history, the physical, you can touch it. Kind of doesn't believe that Bitcoin can be decentralized money while also being purely digital. I think that's the only way it can happen. But that's another story.
Yeah, it kind of ties. I feel like, especially for gold bugs, they're almost there. I don't know if you watched Greg Foss back in the day, but he was like, Peter Schiff is like 99.999% of the way there. And I feel like if they had the opportunity to actually use Bitcoin, you know, download the entire blockchain and just play with it, you know, audit it, you know, figure out what the supply is, make a transaction, it would be easier for them to sort of grasp this thing. But then, like we were saying, it just takes so long to download. Like, I feel as though the experimental phase of it, you know, we're not talking about, you know, your entire, you know, savings, perhaps on your first node, but just a little bit so you can play with it. I feel like even that's becoming more difficult because of the resources that are required in order to run a full node.
And it's like, yeah, like the patience, like for someone like him, he would definitely understand it because where Bitcoin like completely supersedes gold is like Bitcoin has a payment network attached already. While gold as an asset could work, it failed because it relies on people in its payment network. It doesn't have like Bitcoin just relies on math for its payment network, and like the protocol handles everything. You handle everything. Everyone running a node handles everything. So he doesn't get to experience that same thing, and he would think, oh well, I have gold in this company, and then I have this card, and they let me pay through my gold balance. I'm like, yeah, but that's centralized. Like you don't realize that that's centralized. Like he doesn't like. yeah, he's missing the self custody side, which is what Bitcoin was designed for. Like, it's why custodial exchanges are kind of like almost unnecessary now. Like, they had their place when wallets were in a really primitive state, really difficult to use before the invention of the seed phrase. But now, like, software wallets, like, they're very easy to use. Like, it's not like Electrum is the only thing you got. Like, you have really simple user-friendly options like
Yeah.
Green, Aqua, Blue, Wall Satoshi. So, like, we don't really need custodial exchanges anymore.
So, what does your dad think about Bitcoin?
My dad loves Bitcoin. He really thought that like deficit spending was one of the big problems. Like excessive social spending was basically going to lead to a problem in our society, which I think we're already starting to see because there's kind of like no limits to the amount of social spending that one could request, and that kind of just leads to your currency absorbing the impact of the debt. It's like that one Federal Reserve guy says, he's like, there's an infinite amount of cash in the Federal Reserve, so it doesn't matter
Yeah.
how much debt the government has, they're always just going to be able to print money. So it means the currency itself is going to take the beating. It's going to lose value to satisfy the debt requirement, and that's obviously a big problem.
Yeah,
Bitcoin is the
exactly.
solution.
Yeah, exactly. You need a container for all that fiat that's just flooding the system. So I don't know if you're still like in touch with your university alumni, the economics department and stuff. Have you touched base with like former professors or your former colleagues to see what they think of Bitcoin, or what do they think of you working for the Bitcoin Well?
So I had one colleague that helped get me into crypto. She was volunteering with the Blockchain Research Institute, which was like the first organization that I was involved with. It was pretty interesting seeing that, because even though it was like a blockchain kind of first attitude, seeing the like not hearing about Bitcoin or crypto or any of these things,
Yeah.
and seeing all these companies very seriously being like, we want to figure out how to harness the blockchain, and being like, oh, okay, like I don't know what this technology is, and I don't think most of these people do either, but
Yeah.
whatever it is, there's something really important here. And like, it's not like enterprise blockchain, I believe, is ever going to be a solution. I think blockchains fundamentally are slow and expensive on purpose to maximize security, which isn't optimal for anything where you want, quote unquote, speed and efficiency and low cost, which is what most enterprises are looking for,
Yeah.
supply chain, etc. So, but I was still interested, and that made me like think like, okay, this thing is legit. This thing is worth pivoting my career path for, because it's new, it's innovative, and everyone really cares about it, and they're trying to figure it out. And like, I'm gonna try and figure it out too. So the UFT program actually ended up having one professor that was running some sort of enterprise blockchain research institute division. Actually, his name is Andreas Park. I'd love for any of the viewers to check him out. I know he's a pretty smart guy. I'm not sure if he is like a Bitcoin max like myself. It might take a little bit more thinking. But I've noticed like a pretty big pattern with most folks, probably even including myself when I first came out the scene, where it's like, hey, Bitcoin's cool. I'm here to fix it. Or I'm here to improve on it.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is why we have
Yeah.
every other cryptocurrency pretty much, and like
Yep.
most, yeah. So it, yeah,
Yeah. That is a classic tale.
yeah.
Very classic. So now, like on the professional side of things with the Bitcoin Well, your services are available to individuals and to companies. In terms of adoptions, I think Adam said that the Bitcoin Well started was it in 2013 that he bought his first ATM, or?
It would be, yeah. It was probably like around the end of 2013, and most of the fleet I think would have been starting to have rolled out in 2014. I know that happened pretty quickly, and yeah, the Bitcoin ATM was a really good alternative to the exchange at the time. This is like
Yeah.
very early.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to access Bitcoin. It was very difficult to like, people were sending money across. This was way before my Bitcoin time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it started off as ATMs, and then eventually we rolled out in 2022 the online platform.
Exactly.
Just in Canada, which is now expanded to the United States, which is very awesome.
And so, do you see an uptick in institutional adoption, or maybe institutional is a big word, but like private companies, for example, or is it still like a high retail focus?
We're seeing companies coming on. I find it's harder when the company is governed by a committee of people.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
easier
Yep.
when where basically almost like smaller businesses work better because there's less people to convince. Um, Anthony Pompliano had this great observation about the dynamics of a committee where it's like you're in or you're out, and once you're in, you want to stay in, so you want to stay on the committee. So you don't want to make a bold decision that could threaten your position on the committee, which basically reduces risk taking and reduces maybe even like the proper direction that the company ought to go. Maybe the company ought to be moving in a bold direction, but eventually someone gets cozy and they want to kind of move towards a safer direction, not adopting Bitcoin, and then that's kind of where I think a lot of that resistance ends up coming in. That most people aren't willing to consider it. They don't want to take that step up. But then when you look at other businesses like Tahini's, right? Like you get
Yeah.
someone that can
Yeah.
like wholeheartedly, really embrace Bitcoin, and then you really see how the productivity of Bitcoin kind of just works for you, and you can take that productivity and then put it back into your business. And like Tahini's just popping up with locations everywhere. They're crushing it. I mean, shawarma is like some of my favorite food as someone
Yeah.
born and raised on Southern Ontario. But I think that success story is going to be mirrored by a lot of folks. I mean, like look at MicroStrategy. Like if they end up selling their Bitcoin, they're going to have so much. They're going to be able to do whatever they want, like start any type of endeavor. So that's incredibly exciting.
There was this morning, I was going to send it to you, but I was like, with the time difference, that might not be very nice of me. But the Financial Times released this report, or they call it a film, on a markets analyst who every year apparently they have a stock picking game, and it's FT staff plus readers. They pick their stocks. They pick the stocks that they think are going to win, that they're going to short. And she shorted MicroStrategy. So
Oh,
overall, yeah, within the game, she came in like fifth to last. So, this market analyst who's writing about this sucks, basically. She doesn't know what she's doing. And so they decided to do this film. It's like a 20-minute film on MicroStrategy. And at one point in this film, she said, Bitcoin still has no use case. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I mean, the critiques that they laid out with respect to MicroStrategy and if they're too leveraged and what happens if they can no longer raise capital and stuff like that. Sure, why not? That's a risk that you should evaluate before investing. But when she said, Bitcoin still has no use case, I was like, what is wrong with like with TradFi? Like, what is it that they don't understand?
well, I think it's that they don't want to understand, and it would probably compromise their view. Like, first off, like, are they getting any funding from a central bank or the WEF, like any sort of like fiat entrenched system that probably ultimately wants them to defend the fiat system, right? That's one problem. And two, it's like I remember when there were all those like hit pieces out against Bitcoin, talking about how it's so bad, especially the environmental pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like you probably get these people that aren't specializing in Bitcoin. They're writing about all sorts of financial assets, and their boss is like, "Hey, write me an article about why Bitcoin sucks, and I need it on my desk on Monday." And the person's like, "Oh crap, okay." So we're googling like, "Why does Bitcoin suck?" And they're
Yeah,
reading some other person's article who had their boss say the same thing to them like 2 weeks ago, and they're just
yeah.
regurgitating the same stuff over and over again. Like they're nonsensical, not true arguments. Like saying that Bitcoin mining is going to boil the oceans. Like, well, like you don't know how complicated power generation distribution is, and like did you know that like I don't know 40% of the power generated every single day is just straight up wasted? Like Bitcoin helps capture, monetize, and incentivize the proper um, distribution and like capture of energy. So it's like that's not really a true argument. And so like it might result in like a net increase in energy, but you analysis like mirrors with a net increase in energy, like an increase in the quality of life standards, like
Yeah,
increase in like just
your
yeah, like
GDP.
overall
Yeah.
quality of life. So it's like there's a lot of things that they're missing, but I think ultimately it just conflicts with their worldview that they're kind of being paid by, right? Like they're being paid by fiatism, basically.
Yeah, totally. So I wanted to get your take as well on this whole idea of decoupling, and what you think. So recently, we saw a dip or a rise in the bond yields. And then we also saw a lot of stocks selling off. But Bitcoin seemed to be like, doing its own thing while these traditional assets were tanking, basically. What do you think is happening? Like, do you think that the individuals, the market participants are en masse, like finally starting to figure out what Bitcoin is and what its power is?
I think it's definitely getting to that point. I think it still definitely has like, I haven't seen the data recently, but I swear the correlation to like the Nasdaq or like the stock index would still, like the American stocks would still be pretty high, and I think that's also reflective of like the majority of people that are buying and selling and using Bitcoin. There might be like a Western dominance there, a Western bias
Yeah.
there, and it's also like capital markets already have a bias towards the American and Western markets. So like
Yeah.
if you ask someone in El Salvador, like maybe Bitcoin is already completely decoupled from the stock market, or maybe if you're asking someone in Turkey, like I know that they're like various countries have had currency issues. So like from my perspective, it might seem very coupled with stocks, but from their perspective, it might have already fully decoupled. And I think that just really comes from like the understanding of what Bitcoin is. Like fundamentally, it's like maybe very similar to commodities, so it could maybe be tied to like the commodity cycle. But even like there isn't really an increase and decrease in the supply that can be generated by like increasing supply production. So I eventually Bitcoin will be fully decoupled. I think the only reason it hasn't been is just because it's not fully understood. It's still viewed
Yeah.
as a riskier asset. So anything else that's viewed as like a risky equity is going to be kind of lumped into that same kind of category. Yeah. It's funny. I remember when MicroStrategy was being ridiculed as being a small company and insignificant when they first
Yeah.
started adopting Bitcoin by like all those like Bloomberg Financial Times analysts. And it's like now they're making documentaries about it and they're still not understanding it, but people are starting to wake up to it.
They definitely are. And I'm wondering if, like what we saw as a result of, the tariffs, the famous tariffs that Trump is like, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. I wonder if people are starting to sense that, the traditional, 60/40 portfolio rule is not what it was like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Like, I wonder if slowly but surely the macro environment is encouraging people to go out and see things a bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was really. I feel like the argument is definitely sound. Like the 60/40 portfolio has got to be pretty dead. Like when we had near 0% interest rates for quite a while. I mean, like that would have been brutal for bond yields. I don't have a retirement portfolio. I don't even expect to have like a government paid retirement portfolio or anything like that. I think currency is going to be basically dead by that time. I think Bitcoin is my retirement. So it's a little bit tough to to kind of say there. Yeah, I think Bitcoin is the best chance that people our age have at a retirement. And I think relying
Yeah.
on government handouts is going to be something that maybe worked in the past, but just not anymore.
Yeah, that's definitely the case in France, with the cohort of baby boomers who retired and the younger people, and there's no money. And it's kind of freaky to see, because I moved over here. I'm in Switzerland, but in 2008, and I go to France relatively frequently. And it's freaky to see the level of hope within the society just continuously decrease. Like, like you can sense it in the air that people are like, there's no money for us anymore. It's all done. Like, this system is over.
And it's like I think as a Bitcoiner, like when the folks like we're in Bitcoin, and I'm gonna say it again, like we're all so early in Bitcoin, and we're really privileged in the fact that we have an asset that is so independent of any government's actions. Like we like a government could do something and the price of Bitcoin could react, but like your possession of the Bitcoin is going to remain unchanged, which I think is the really important factor to consider with self custody, and
Yeah.
that's what gives you just such confidence that like you're fine. You're always gonna have your Bitcoin. Who cares if the price of it goes up or down? Like you have true
Yeah.
sovereignty with your own money, which is really just special. And I think to the folks in France that might be, or to anybody that might be thinking, I feel a little bit doomed by the government. I feel like my generation is maybe a little bit doomed. Just know that like you do have an opportunity at like financial success that you may not have thought possible. And with regards to like, you don't have to have an incredibly lucrative career. You just need to have a lucrative savings mechanism. And Bitcoin
Yeah.
is that savings mechanism that will be productive for you, even if you can't increase your own productivity. It's like with the things Taylor said, like inflation 10% a year, and he can't grow his company more than 5% a year. He's got to
Yeah.
fill that productivity gap, and Bitcoin does that. And Bitcoin fills that productivity gap not just for large corporations, but for every single person.
It is so true. And it is like, I mean, So I have mixed feelings about Michael Saylor. When he announced his Bitcoin strategy, his company's Bitcoin strategy, I was like, this is amazing because as a CEO, I mean, like you were talking about the group dynamics earlier. People get comfortable; they want to be perceived in a certain way. In the case of Michael Saylor, when he made his announcement, I'm guessing he was like, I have nothing to lose, so I'm going to go for this kind of thing. So I was really championing that, but I kind of get a bit not nervous. That's not the word, but I fear that people will literally take MicroStrategy, like individuals specifically, as a proxy for Bitcoin, and they'll forget about Bitcoin and everything else that it represents, and they'll just go all in on MicroStrategy, which is, I mean, it's a free world. We can do whatever we want, but I feel like it kind of tells only part of Bitcoin's story, and it only exposes people to like part of the amazing things that Bitcoin allows us to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of touches down on like the whole meme of number go up.
Yeah.
To anyone who might be unfamiliar with that, it's like, yeah, like Bitcoin's scarcity and asymmetric demand basically mean that the price per unit is going to constantly go up, and
Yeah.
that does attract a lot of people. That is, as a decentralized asset, that's kind of Bitcoin's only marketing campaign. That is like able to like promote itself. And then once you really start to dive down, you're like, oh wait, that's actually not the most important thing about Bitcoin. It's being able to self custody it and not being able to have it be stolen from you, not being able to have your transactions censored, which is kind of where the important part is. So yeah, if people are maybe avoiding buying Bitcoin self custody to hodl MicroStrategy, I
Yeah.
think you might be chasing short term gains, and
Yeah.
I think the risk. I don't really pay too much attention to MicroStrategy's bond activities. I'm not an expert in the bond market, but what kind of concerns me about MicroStrategy, and you could even lump, BlackRock or Coinbase into this argument, is that like the problem of the honeypot. The larger a single honeypot gets for
Yeah.
Bitcoin, the more attractive it is for that honeypot to be compromised, and that could even be as simple as another executive order where it says MicroStrategy, we have so much debt, we need some equity back in this. We're going to seize all your Bitcoin. Here's a 20% price increase for your Bitcoins personally. Here's all your cash. Thank you. Goodbye. And that's basically what they did 90 years ago with gold. Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of one of my biggest concerns. And my remedy for that is just a self custody. Like my Bitcoin's not
Yeah.
going to be seized. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
compromised. So I hope everyone else can take that same lesson. But at the end of the day, like you can't protect everybody, but most people should self custody, and a lot of people do. So.
I totally agree. So, okay, what are the signs that like it's part of the 21 questions I know, but I'm curious to hear your take on this. What are the signs that like a 6102 attack is in the pipeline? Like what are some things that, your government could say or do or not do where you should be like, "Oh, I need to start paying attention."
Well, I think if you live under government, which is everybody, then you should already be paying attention because,
Yeah.
like, I talked about this in like our in Bitcoin. Well, we do a monthly Bitcoin for Beginners webinar, and one of the things I talk about is I contrast Bitcoin to fiat currency, and they have completely different governance systems. Which governance, doesn't sound sexy, but basically it's like who makes the rules. And with
Yeah.
our regular government, it's just like whoever's in charge. It's a person. And that person could be elected. Person could not be elected. That person could wake up and have a different attitude one day and just read something that's not true and just make that's the decision. And like people are fickle. You don't want to trust your life in the hands of man. It's much better to trust your life in the hands of math, especially transparent math that everyone
Yeah.
can proofread, which is what Bitcoin is. So
Yeah.
yeah. I would just say like if you have a government, eventually they're going to want to take Bitcoin because they don't have enough and they don't realize how valuable it is yet. And when they do, they're going to be like, oh shoot, we don't have enough. We need to get some by legal means, and then they'll just create new legal means.
Hi, everyone. It's Saida, host of Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. To my listeners based in Canada and the US, if you're looking for a seamless way to stack sats, i.e., save money in Bitcoin, check out the Bitcoin Well. And you're probably thinking, Sai, you moved to Switzerland a long time ago. How do you know the service is good? Well, I asked my father, the man who famously told me there's nothing wrong with being frugal, to test out their service, and everything checks out. He visited one of the ATMs in Scarborough. It was very intuitive, very easy to use, and the fees were not too high. So if my dad says it's okay, it's okay. Remember to use referral code AAB21Q when you stack sats with the Bitcoin Well. And please, 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 let me know how your experience is. Give me all of the details. And if you'd ever like to be on Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions to talk about your experience with Bitcoin Well or just your experience with Bitcoin in general, I would be more than happy to host you. They'll scramble. So I'm going to sort of like rewind a bit more. So you said that you worked for a hedge fund and you were building out a REIT product on Ethereum. How did you make the transition from that to Bitcoin Well?
It was really like the research that kind of made me a Bitcoin maxi. And then COVID kind of happened, so the
Yeah.
project, especially a real estate investment product, it was really difficult to acquire and scout new real estate properties during like the peak COVID shutdown era. So I was doing a lot of trading, and obviously, Sailor was talking about Bitcoin, so I was kind of just focusing on Bitcoin. And like what I was doing at Shell Service Capital at that time was I was basically managing the product, like designing and managing the product, and overseeing the dev team to make sure that we were going to build it and not compromise the fundamental design. And some of my
Yeah.
fundamental design principles included scarcity, transparency, Bitcoin elements that I admired and wanted to mimic because I knew that they were successful in Bitcoin and I wanted to capture that success, ideally, like lightning in a bottle type thing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so then I ended up seeing this opportunity at Bitcoin Well. They were just starting out their online platform, expanding from the network of ATMs. And I thought, I've been like one of the things that we had to design was acquiring the tokens for our project, creating a wallet for that, the ability to use and deploy those tokens. So it was very similar to like an exchange activity. While I wouldn't categorize Bitcoin as an exchange because exchanges also nowadays include custody. Bitcoin fundamentally does not include custody, but a lot of the design elements would be similar, like buying and selling, utilizing, because with Bitcoin you can use Bitcoin to pay bills.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, like kind of similar. End up joining the product team on that side. And then I ended up moving over to marketing where I currently am now. I'm a pretty high energy guy. I love talking about Bitcoin, so I think that it just
Yeah.
ended up being a bit of a natural fit. But one of the things I really like about Bitcoin Well, shout out to everyone that works there. We got this really solid team of people that get Bitcoin, have an expertise relating to Bitcoin, and they're helping driving the mission further that way. So like we're really just like a team now of like experienced, hardened Bitcoiners that get Bitcoin, get like the big vision, and I feel like that just allows us to kind of all work in unison in a good direction. Which, I mean, it's where we are now. Like we have killer products in Canada coming to the States as well. I think our swap feature is one of the coolest features I've seen in a Bitcoin company. For anyone who doesn't know, basically you can swap sats from the on-chain network, from like on-chain, blockchain, regular Bitcoin to the Lightning Network and vice versa, and we don't charge a single sat for this. If you want to check it out, do check out Saida's affiliate link and sign up there. You'll be able to swap Bitcoin from on-chain to Lightning, Lightning to on-chain for zero fees, which is just so useful for any Bitcoiner.
So I get from time to time people who are totally unfamiliar with Bitcoin watching this podcast, and then I'll get a message. Can you explain what self custody is?
So I'll start off by describing what not self custody is. So most
Okay.
of us custody or store our financial assets with somebody else. This will be a bank, traditionally, because banks also kind of handle other aspects of our money. But there are people that are just custodians as well. You might have heard of like BitGo, or I think State Street might be one of these as well. And with if you wanted to self custody something that isn't like Bitcoin, you might be looking at like gold in a safe in your house. That's kind of like the analog version of self custody. You might be able to do that with a stock certificate, but the stock certificate, like depending on if the stock certificate actually is the stock, you might not be able to self custody it. So a commodity like instrument is probably easier to self custody in an analog version. And then when we look at the digital version, it's basically Bitcoin is, you can say digital gold, and you store it in a digital safe, which is your cold key, a cold storage wallet, your cold card, whatever it may be. And basically what that means is that only you have access to the ability to use or move or utilize this asset. With Bitcoin, that means that you have a digital access that only you have. And with Bitcoin, it unlike a traditional safe in your house where a dude with a really big hammer could smash that open, an army could smash that open. Bitcoin actually has such good cryptographic security that it doesn't matter the size of your physical or even digital hammer, you're not going to be able to smash that digital safe open. And that's why when I say that Bitcoin wallet technology is at a point where we don't need custodians anymore, it's because custodians can still be beaten by a digital hammer or a legal hammer, but your self-custody wallet cannot be beaten by any kind of hammer. And that's why everyone should self-custody, because it's the safest way to store any kind of financial asset.
Exactly. A huge aha moment for me on my learning journey was to realize that, my seed phrase and my Bitcoin are one and the same. If I share my seed phrase, and it's silly because it's only like a string of characters or, 12 or 24 words, but that is your Bitcoin. If you share that with anyone, you are essentially giving away, the control of your Bitcoin. I find I try sometimes to take a step back and like sort of reminisce on my own journey to understand the questions people have, because after a while, the jargon is just so present and you just take for granted that everyone understands like self-custody, what this means, controlling your wallet, the difference between like a centralized exchange like Coinbase, for example, and what the Bitcoin wallet offers. So that's why I asked you to explain that.
Good, yeah, and it's like that's one of the things too. Is like do ask me to take a step back, because I think as someone who did an undergrad in econ and likes visual data representations, one thing I'm a victim of is I'm like, oh man, like, dude, look at this chart, and I'm like, I just sent someone a chart, I'm like, oh, it says everything. I'm like, oh, give me your feedback, and they're like, I don't even know what this thing is telling me. I'm like, oh, and I gotta explain it, and I'm like, yeah, so I can sometimes get a little bit lost in the weeds, and maybe get too excited to kind of like take that step back and take us a moment to explain, which is probably my fault as a Bitcoiner in education. But I think it's passion, and it's great because there's just so much to talk about with Bitcoin. Like you can go on the computer science side or the math side, the econ side, or like the history of money side, or like the philosophy of what is property side, and like any deep dive into that can really help you understand Bitcoin. And then all the other sides are just like bonus philosophy experiments or thought experiments to go through.
Most definitely. And again, you had a head start with your father, creating films on and speaking about communism and property rights. Like that is such an important seed to have planted in a child's head to grow into the man that you are today, if I may.
No, thank you very much. I'm sure my dad would be very proud to hear that. And I think definitely very fortunate to hear that. I mean, it's interesting. Like his films, one of his films started with a family in Ukraine during the Holodomor, the wheat famine in Ukraine, and they're basically waiting to be liberated by Hitler. And I remember as a kid being like, it was so bad. How could you want Hitler to come and save you? And it's like, that's the dire, horrible circumstance that a person living in a communist system could find themselves in. And it's like just wanting this one evil to end. And it's like the whole balance of choosing between two evils. Not that Hitler liberating you would be a good thing, but just like wanting the Holodomor, wanting the communist seizure of private property to end, and almost just wanting anything but this kind of that attitude. And that forced me as a kid to just think critically about what communism is. As a Polish person, obviously had a very horrible family interaction with the Nazis and Nazi Germany. So it's not like I took that kind of a comparison lightly. So it really forced me to think, wow, how bad could communism be? And it's bad. It dehumanizes you because it doesn't allow you to make your own decisions.
Yeah, it's and actually that's nothing to do with money or savings technology. One thing I definitely appreciate about the people in Bitcoin that I've been exposed to is that we get into these sort of deeper conversations. Sometimes there's a lot of passion or friction, but we actually look to understand the nuances of things as opposed to just saying like good, bad, and that's it. You know, like when you describe the choice between two evils, like, I mean, in my generation at least, we've never like really truly seen that to that level, to that extent.
Yeah, and like like I think we definitely live in a really privileged time, especially like in out in us in the West. We have like a lot of economic and geopolitical stability. But also, like you being in Switzerland, just not too far from you in Ukraine, we see where like that can still be compromised, and like legacy elements of an old system create the seeds of conflict that are still brewing today.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely kind of a lot to be aware of, and just know that like things for us can still change very quickly. And it's important to be aware and to understand, like what you said, like Bitcoiners like to kind of be aware of all the little things. They don't just like to understand the whole big picture and not kind of like focus on the granular
Yeah.
details. It's like, no, we want to understand the granular details that make up the big picture.
Exactly. It's like, I mean, I witnessed the truckers' protest from here. My father was on the phone. He's like, Saida, they're seizing like bank accounts, you know? And I was like, that's not the Canada that I grew up in. Like, you know, if you had told me this before, I'd be like, no way that would ever happen in Canada. But I don't know. Like, it's like a cocktail of events coming together. And all of a sudden, you know, if you disagree with what your government says and you decide to provide financial support, all of a sudden, like, you know, you're a bad person. And I thought that was pretty freaky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm living here in Ottawa now, and I know some Ottawa residents have maybe a different attitude towards the truckers' protest because it really kind of climaxed here.
Yeah.
I think, especially folks that were maybe a little bit distant to the situation and were unaware of like how disruptive it could have been in certain areas. Just saying, hey, my uncle was a trucker, so I want to donate $50. I resonate with this guy. He doesn't have a job anymore. I want to give him some money so he can buy Timmy's over the next week. Whatever it is, right? Like very, very innocent kind of thing. But then you're basically, having your bank account shut down and censored because you're potentially aiding like, what was it, like a terrorist organization, or like they were labeling the truckers as some sort of like bad group that allowed them to make that if you contributed, then your bank account would be seized. And like, that's obviously incredibly problematic, and like, but I don't think that is like the only political viewpoint that expresses financial censorship or experiences financial censorship. Like if you want to donate to individuals in Ukraine, like who just had their house blown up, that would probably be pretty difficult. Like a lot of the organizations that you would go through would probably just take your money. If you try to provide humanitarian aid in Gaza, like good luck. Most of that stuff has been cut off. I heard there have been humanitarian aid ships that have been like directly attacked. Right, so like getting money out there could be challenging, and then potentially you get put on a list, and like that's the thing. It's like it doesn't matter what your political viewpoint is. Eventually, there will be someone in charge that will find a way to penalize you for that, and that is just inherently problematic. Like any political viewpoint will be censored, will be criminalized, and that I don't think is valid. And so
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Like those of us who always want to say the right thing and do the right thing, like it's impossible. Like the game is rigged against you. So, the least you can do is, I mean, self-custody your Bitcoin and have that, and just figure out how to maneuver if and when the time comes.
Yeah, because like self-custodying your Bitcoin allows you to truly do what you want with it.
Yeah.
And like one of the things that we look at communist China today, and we are very aware of like they have like digital currency that they use to control people. If you say something bad about the Communist Party or whatever, then your ability to travel within the country is cut off because you can't digitally spend, and like you're just fixing the location. They have tracking cameras everywhere, so like obviously you could be monitored, and like. That basically means that a person in China cannot fully, wholeheartedly express their political wills without repercussions, which basically means that they can't express them. And with Bitcoin, that does allow you to have a greater ability to express your political will, because now you're able, like it's money that cannot be censored. Like I remember when there were the Hong Kong protests, and people were trying to advocate for a free Hong Kong, and they couldn't use digital money because it would be tracked down to them, and then they would get fired from their job for protesting. So they would collect coins to use the subway to get to the protest location, and it's like that kind of like the super analog version of currency, which the meme is if they invented cash today, the government would make it illegal.
Yeah, totally.
Right, like Bitcoin allows you to express yourself truly and without censorship, and that's really important, especially in like today's political climate, but in any political climate. So I think that's one of the very important things about Bitcoin is that you can express your political will, whether it's donating to truckers, donating to Gaza, protesting in Hong Kong, whatever it might be. You can express your political opinion.
Yeah. And if you're one of those people who doesn't have a political opinion and you have like a family, for example, I can say from my experience, I started to learn about Bitcoin in 2017, that using it as a savings technology and the relief that you develop over the years, because initially you're like, oh no, it's down. Oh, it's back up. Oh, it's down. But then, with time and experience, you see this is what Bitcoin does. And more people are starting to understand what this is. Therefore, the fiat price or value of it will continue to increase. I can say that it is a huge relief, especially like I'm a mom and everything. Like I'm in a different phase of my life where I'm really thinking more about the future. And in terms of being able to save and stuff, it's not financial advice, but I would say that it is definitely worth learning about and acquiring a little bit so that you can learn even more. And then when you get comfortable, getting more.
Yeah, it's like I was thinking when I was reviewing some of the questions for today, what is the cost to self-custody? And I would argue that it's actually a negative cost. You'll actually end up paying yourself. And the reason is because, well, one, Bitcoin has zero storage costs, zero annual storage costs.
Yeah.
You might have a fixed cost to bind your wallet, but zero annual cost for your wallet, which is untrue for basically any financial asset. And then where was I going with this? Right. So because it's no cost to own it, you're owning Bitcoin. As everyone who recommends to someone, get started in Bitcoin, you'll learn about it. So that's where the negative return comes through. It's like a negative return is basically you're getting paid. Like the negative costs or negative storage cost is basically getting paid to store it, which is you're paying yourself in education and better understanding Bitcoin, which is going to basically result in you buying more Bitcoin and storing more Bitcoin than you had initially conceived, which is going to lead to, obviously we know that Bitcoin appreciates and gives you value in the future. So it's basically going to give you more value in the future than you're previously calculating. So that's why I'd say like the storage costs for Bitcoin are basically negative in the long run, because you're going to get smarter, you're going to become a better Bitcoiner, and you're going to acquire more Bitcoin, and you're going to be able to have more value to deploy in the future.
Yeah, totally. It is. Yeah. It's just, and the initial hurdle is really, I guess, experimenting or trying something that you've never done before and questioning if you're doing certain things properly. But there's so many tutorials out there. You mentioned that Bitcoin Well hosts a monthly webinar. What does that entail and how can people sign up to join?
Yeah, so I would love for folks to join the webinar. You can go to bitcoinwell.com/webinar. We have our own landing page for that. You have a sign up button there, so just click on that, and you'll be able to sign up for the next webinar. I'm excited to see you there.
Yeah.
The webinar is basically it's two-part series, or two-part endeavor. Which the first part is why Bitcoin, and it's very much a comparison of Bitcoin to fiat currency. So comparing things like, what is the governance system, math or man, what are you trusting in? What is your ability like to send it? Can one be censored? Can one not be censored? What does the supply schedule kind of look like for the two? So one has inflation, one has basically a fixed supply that is transparent and you can see the future. Like no one knows how many dollars are going to be printed between now and next year, but we know exactly how many Bitcoin are going to be mined from now and next year. So just kind of like showing that kind of fundamental difference, which obviously like kind of is inherent to Bitcoin's price. The scarcity of Bitcoin is kind of inherent to its price increase, given the constant increase in demand. And then it kind of dives into how to buy Bitcoin. It's like a very quick and simple click-by-click walkthrough on how to find, download, set up a Bitcoin wallet, and then add it to your Bitcoin wallet account and start buying. I find when I was first buying Bitcoin, I needed those click-by-click walkthroughs. My first ever Bitcoin transaction was me using Quadriga CX nonetheless, withdrawing Bitcoin and then immediately depositing it right back into my receiving address on the exchange. I didn't know what I was doing. I could have lost all that Bitcoin for all I know. But yeah, I would like moving Bitcoin the very first time is weird and scary.
Were your
It's
hands sweaty? Like, were you like sweaty nervous, or was it like,
I was so unaware of what I was doing, and I only had like a couple $100, so I just didn't care. I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to send Bitcoin at some point, so here it goes. And that was my attitude. I was like, it might be all a lot. It was just a couple $100, but like what is really important, that my mistake with thinking it's just a couple $100 was that that's a
yeah,
fraction of a Bitcoin. And I
yeah,
had friends that had money on Quadriga, and they were like, oh, it was a couple grand, but that was half a Bitcoin. And now that's not a couple grand. That's a lot of money. And like in the future, that'll be even more. So it's like this is why you don't want to use custodial exchanges. You want to don't you want to lose your sats because
yeah.
the opportunity cost of that mistake only increases over time.
Do you ever like bring that back up to your friends? You know, remember it was only a couple of thousand, half a Bitcoin, like, or is that something that's like never spoken about anymore?
Most of my friends, like the friends I grew up with, are like not into Bitcoin. They don't like it. I think it has to do with the fact that I grew up in like a decent neighborhood where like
Yeah,
most folks were pretty well off. And I think the closer you are to financial privilege, the harder
yeah,
it is for you to understand how Bitcoin can help like those that are disenfranchised by the current financial system. So you're like, oh well, like my parents have owned a house, my parents have had a steady job. Why do I need this thing that's like gonna, money's not broken. Why do I need something that's gonna fix money? It's basically their
yeah.
perspective. My understanding, at least, of their perspective. And then maybe I'm a little too in the weeds of it, so I'm like, oh, you guys got to get Bitcoin. I just start just like speaking too fast at them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
oh, come on,
Scare
man. Like,
people away. Yeah.
yeah, what are you talking about? I did have one friend who I talked to him about Bitcoin for a while. And he's like, no, 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 no. And then a couple years ago, he texted me. He's like, ah, so NFTs, like, which one should I get? I'm like, none, dude. Like, I guess you can get one. I'm like, buy Bitcoin. And then
No,
that's a
dude.
problem too. It's like when people get to Bitcoin, they think, I've already missed the boat. It's already expensive. Let me buy this other coin that's cheaper, and maybe it'll go up in value too. And then maybe I'll be able to capture the number go up. And it's like that's when the successes, but also banes of Bitcoin's existence, that its number go up technology
Yeah.
has brought on limitless copycats, which slow Bitcoin's adoption and increase fraud. So it's like but obviously we're going to have copycats, and eventually the free market will just show that Bitcoin's so distinct from all the copycats that they'll all fade away into irrelevance. Bitcoin dominance rate on percentage will move back up to 99% where it belongs, and the market will continue to heal. But that'll take time.
So okay, you sound like, I guess, like many Bitcoiners, you spend a lot of your time reading, maybe listening to podcasts, working, obviously. When do you actually find time to like go skiing? I see your skis in the background too.
Uh,
Like, how do you balance, like, I guess, I don't know, do we still say like work-life balance or just life?
oh yeah, I mean, well, that's a good question, right? Like, I think for so many people, work has become such a large part of their job. I think coming from the Toronto area,
Yeah.
which might be to Americans similar to the culture and lifestyle of New York. It's like you live in this hyper expensive city where you have to work so much, like you can't
Yeah.
stop working so you can afford to just to live, which is because like cost of living is so expensive. So it really forces you to kind of not be able to focus on your enjoyments. And then also, try and leaving Toronto, you have like one highway in each direction, so you just have brutal traffic. You try and get to a weekend getaway in the cottages. But I was really fortunate to live in Edmonton for a
Yeah.
little bit, which is just a couple hour drive. That's not a couple hour, it's about a 4 hour drive from the Rockies. But that was close to me. Being an Ontario boy, I could not drive the Rockies, so one weekend trip to the Rockies, and I was absolutely hooked. And I would go every single weekend that I could. Basically, all my vacations were now prioritized around going to skiing. And
Yeah.
what I think is really exciting about skiing is, as someone who played a lot of hockey growing up, I think
Oh,
anyone
okay. Yeah.
who did youth sports can relate to the fact that your peak opportunity to enjoy that sport was in a youth sport, like be it like football, if you maybe you made up to pro or semi-pro in like college, but like
Yeah.
wherever level you got to in your particular sport, you're not able to enjoy that same level of competitiveness, of intensity, and ultimately of passion. I feel like because it's not professional. People are kind of all over the place. You're not going to have that kind of you're not gonna be able to get that same amount of fun out of it, I
Yeah.
would argue. But with skiing, I don't really think that, because you hit a certain age, you're not able, you're like, your enjoyment stops. Like, you're just going out there to have fun. There's no kind of league or anything. Like, you just go out there and have fun. And I think there's a Bitcoin kind of element to skiing, where with Bitcoiners, we're always looking to self-improve, become aware of
Yeah.
our shortcomings, find those shortcomings, and then identify them, and work on them. And skiing is so much like that too, because sports are, there's a team dynamic. You're like, oh, look, I can get smarter at the sport. But with skiing, it's so much on like your technique, and you have to take the responsibility. You're like, oh, I'm bad at turning this way, or I need to get improved this way. And like, it forces you to self-reflect, be
Yeah.
humble and honest about something you might not be doing wrong, because there's no one else to blame but you. So you have to take that responsibility, and you have to improve. And what I think is really interesting about skiers is that you see some skiers that are like very old but still doing it, and they're in incredible shape physically and mentally. And I think that level of like, what are you doing? Like, why are you so resilient? You're always skiing, you're always pushing yourself, you're running because you want to keep skiing when you're older. And like, okay, like that's a lifestyle, that's a life trajectory that I want to be on the path with. I want to be that strong mentally and physically when I'm at that age, and then still doing everything I really enjoy. Like, yeah, that part of skiing, I think, is really magical. Like, that you can do it for so long compared to all these other sports.
I have to tell you. So when I moved here, I don't know if you've gotten this feedback living in Edmonton about people from Toronto, but we are quite egocentric, I find, without even realizing it.
I
And
had to
so,
leave to understand that.
pardon?
I had to leave the Toronto area to understand that like Toronto people have like this. We're the center of the world. We're the center of the Canadian
Yeah, yeah,
universe.
me
Hockey
too.
Hall of Fame is here. We love hockey. Like, oh, center of the universe. Like,
Exactly. And like my worldview, like a Toronto worldview, was the worldview.
mhm,
And because so Toronto's pretty flat, you know this.
mhm,
And I've never actually been out west. I've been to California, but not I've never been to BC or anything. And so when I moved here and I saw the mountains and stuff, I was like, whoa, like I need to get on this. So we came in like the spring and started hiking. And
mhm,
then he was my boyfriend then, he's my husband now. He's like, yeah, we're going to go skiing and stuff. And I saw older people hiking. And I
mhm,
was like, I grew up playing basketball. I grew up playing sports. I used to think I was the shit. And I'm like, oh yeah, like they're like a few steps ahead of us. We're just gonna like, pass them, no problem. They were like in their 60s, and I was like the incline was relatively steep, and
mhm,
I was winded. I couldn't believe it. I could not keep up, and I was like, wow, like there is this thing about, I guess, like the mountains, and outdoor sports that really, really humbles you. And then
mhm.
I didn't grow up skiing. I learned how to ski here, and I was like, okay, another level of being humbled. I cannot show off because I really have to learn what I'm doing. Like my technique is not good at all. And then I stopped for a few years, but now because my daughter's taking skiing lessons, I'm like, I need to like ski with my family and stuff. So I'm more encouraged. But what you say is absolutely true about, the humbling aspect of learning something new. You're by
Mhm.
yourself. If you mess up, if you fall, it's on you. You can't blame other people. And
Mhm.
I think that is such a good mindset to have, especially when you're transitioning into learning about Bitcoin and self custody.
Yeah, like so many of those lessons, yeah, translate to Bitcoin, translate to life.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, yeah, I think I could talk about skiing forever as well, but like you doing it with your daughter is like, I think really unique. And I think if you like coming from like like a sport background, like you wouldn't have been able to do this with your daughter on maybe most things. Like maybe you could teach her how to play basketball or teach
Yeah.
her how to play hockey, but like there will come a level where like both of you won't be able to both give 100%, right?
Yeah.
Someone's going to be pulling back. Someone's going to be
Yeah.
pulling their punches, right? And both skiing, I feel like you can kind of both be going at 100%. Like when I first learned how to ski, it was on a bunny hill, in which where most of my Ontario skiing was.
Yeah.
But it was with my mom and my grandfather, my Polish grandfather, who was
Oh,
skiing all the
nice.
time, year round, North and South America. So it's like that was really cool, like because I could really play hockey with my dad. It was like maybe pond hockey, but then I got too good and fast, and then he was like not able to really keep up. So like once again, someone's always holding back. But with skiing, it's like you can ski with your daughter. You can do your work on your technique on the same slope as your daughter working on a different skill level, a different technique, but on the same slope. You're both having a ton of fun. I think that's really, 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 really special. And then, yeah, the comment on the older folks that are just crushing it. It's like, yeah, it gives you a lot of inspiration for your fitness. And the
Totally.
mountains give you such a good different level of conditioning because of the elevation gains and also the altitude. Both those things just require you to be so much more physically fit. It's like, they're like those old folks in the mountains, they're like Sherpas almost, right? They're like very in amazing shape. And if you look at their cardiovascular and bone health, it's probably that of someone who's decades younger than they actually are.
Yeah, totally. And the kicker is that they all once they get to the top or whatever, they drink alcohol. And I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
What? Like, how does this happen? I remember once on a hiking, it wasn't like a huge hiking expedition, but one guy had like, what is it called? Oh my gosh, Franglish is kicking in, like a thermos filled with vodka. And he's like, have some. And I'm like, no, I'm hiking. And he's like, trust me, this is like the real deal stuff. And so I took a shot while I was walking and I was like, wow, like it was like, it wasn't the vodka you drink at a club. You know what I mean? Like I felt renewed and I had like this burst of energy and I didn't feel tipsy. I didn't no side effects whatsoever. And I was like, maybe there's another element of life that I'm only now tapping into.
I bet any alcohol enthusiast will be like, yes, of course, a little bit of vodka. Definitely with the cold too, right? Like,
Yeah.
I would like I've had some moments on a chairlift, I think Fireball is pretty synonymous with ski culture. The cinnamon makes
Hold
it
on.
feel
What's
like you're warm.
Fireball?
Oh, maybe this
I
is a
don't know what
Canadian
that.
thing. I think
What
it
is
is a
it?
Canadian thing. Fireball is a flavored whiskey, like cinnamon flavored whiskey. So if you've had those like cinnamon hearts on Valentine's Day, it
Oh,
tastes kind
okay.
of like that, but it's like a whiskey. It's a little bit like kind of almost syrupy, maybe like a consistency of like Jaeger. But yeah, that's like if you're playing pond hockey, someone's gonna have Fireball in their pocket. And when they pull it out,
Okay.
we're all passing around, we're all sipping it, warms you up, gets a little fired up, Fireball. But yeah, I definitely got to do some hiking though, with maybe a little bit of vodka. I'm gonna add that to my hiking stash.
Really good. I don't know what it was, but it was like stuff that I've never seen or I'm not a big alcohol person, so I'm
Same.
probably wrong, but I don't think this is the stuff you like can buy in a store kind of thing.
Okay,
Like
okay.
he seemed to like be like, prized vodka kind of
This is
thing.
legit. This is legit.
Yeah.
My go-to hiking activity actually is mushroom foraging. I got this skill from my mom who was in Poland, which during communist times, mushroom foraging was definitely really good, not just for connecting with the culture, but also like supplementing the food supply. But like yeah, if you could find like chanterelle mushrooms in the forest, like oh my god, those are delicious. They're so good, and it's like vegan hunting or vegan fishing because it's like you have this anticipation, you have this success and this adrenaline, but then also like when you find one mushroom, there's usually many kind of around, so it's kind of like okay, like success, and you're like oh another one, another one, another one, and it can get pretty exciting. And then obviously you have this prized catch, which then you can go and reap your rewards at home. Cook up some nice meal. My favorite go-to with fresh chanterelles is to make a mushroom risotto. Oh, very very good. I definitely recommend it. And I know in Europe you have a lot more. You have a lot of old soil. That's what my mom would always say. Like probably the ice age here in North America moved a lot of the soil, so in a lot of areas it's not suitable for mushroom foraging. But apparently, like the way soil was in Europe, or at least in Eastern Europe, was supposed to be very ideal for that.
Or truffles, les truffes.
Ooh,
Oh,
your accent is very good. No French speaking in my repertoire, unfortunately.
truffles are like in fall, so like I guess October season. They come out in restaurants. I'll just walk by it and my mouth just starts to water instantly. Like it
So
is.
fresh.
So, because I was never a mushroom fan either, and chanterelle, I've grown to start appreciating truffles, les cèpes as well. See, these are things that I learned in French over here, so I have no idea. I guess it's cèpe, mushrooms, whatever in English, but they're actually quite good, and so I'm like my palate is expanding, so to speak. But before that, you would have never caught me eating mushrooms or anything.
It's crazy, like like the biology of mushrooms, how they're like not regular plants, but they're like half plants, half mammal on like the mycelium networks that when you're picking a mushroom, they release like these microscopic spores. Like they're so different. It feels like an alien almost when you're picking mushrooms.
Have you read the article? I need to find it. Comparing mushrooms to Bitcoin.
No, but that sounds awesome. I love Bitcoin. I love mushrooms, so I definitely want to check that out.
I will send it to you. It's Stefan Smith, who is a Bitfluencer. He works for, I forget the name of the company, but they help with multi-sig setups for high net worth individuals. On his X profile, he's got the article pinned, sorry. And he's like, if you want to understand me, like read this article. So I'll send
Okay.
it to you afterward.
Yes, please. I would love to check that out. Yeah, there are some really killer Bitcoin articles out there. One that I really like. This is a bit of a tangent away from the fungi, but Alex Gladstein's article
Yeah.
on the petrodollar, talking about like the United States
Yeah.
relationship with Saudi Arabia, which I think is like really helpful to understand like how
Yeah.
complicated the entrenchment of the fiat system is. And most people I think just think of money as just like kind of like water. It just like moves things around, like it just helps our boats stay afloat and help our boats move around, but it's actually like the source of power for a lot of governments. Like the United States supremacy is very much tied to their dollar supremacy in markets. And I don't think both those things could coexist if they sorry, I don't think both like one of those things could exist without the other. So it's like, yeah, that article I think kind of helped break down like why is the Middle East selling oil to Europe in U.S. dollars? Why is that system like so deeply rooted in there? And it also kind of helps potentially explain the source of a lot of conflict or U.S. involvement in conflict over in there. And overall, I think it's really interesting to understand in geopolitics. I think we all have
Yeah.
our own bias and our own perspective, but I think it's really
Definitely.
interesting to think of
Yeah.
like what is this person's perspective and why do they want to change things so dramatically and like ignore our propaganda and our reasons for why they want to do it. What are their reasons for wanting to do it? I think that's really important to understand for most folks.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I feel like like there are short periods of time where I think I get it. And then new information, I see new information and I'm like, okay, I don't understand anything. And then I'm like, okay, I understand exactly what's happening. And then more information comes in and I'm like, I know nothing. It's hard for me to wrap my head around everything. Right now with, especially with Tether's dominance, speaking of the US dollar, I kind of feel as though, and also the fact that, the Trump administration is saying that they want to pull out of funding, I'll just say certain European initiatives without going into detail. I feel as though there's a push now for the CBDC here in Europe, which Switzerland is like this thing surrounded by European countries. So I don't know how that's going to work. We do have our own currency, but I feel as though a lot of these shifts in geopolitical policy is sort of putting pressure on the European Central Bank to come out with its own digital currency. Whether I think it's competent as an organization to put out something that's sound, the answer is no right now. Who knows? I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. And then afterward, it's how are they going to get people to use it? They'll definitely use coercion. They'll force people. But still, like, I don't see this ending very nicely for the euro as a currency in the medium term. But again, like a new piece of information will come out and I'll probably shift. But what you say is true. Like right now we are looking at a moment in time where things are changing.
And like the CBDCs are just so inevitable. Like from a central banker's perspective, like they would love a CBDC. So central bankers want to control money supply and interest rates. And it's difficult to control the money supply if you don't actually know what the money supply is at any given time or what the distribution of the money supply is. Especially in the, right now we're in kind of like a hybrid cash and digital state, which does complicate their calculations. But if we're in a purely digital state, it'll make their calculations very easy. They won't have to have like quarterly or like weekly estimates. They'll have by the minute accurate information. So from a central banker's perspective, CBDCs seem very ideal, but that's like fundamental to the perspective of I need to control these levers to manipulate the economy and not let the free market dictate it. So it's just a fundamental different perspective, but from that perspective, it does definitely seem ideal. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of, because every central banker is going to feel that way, which means every central banker is going to be wanting it to get pushed through. And from what I've heard, occasionally I hear of these Bitcoin-esque type folks in these central bank systems, but they end up just not sticking around. For whatever reasons, they end up not being kind of the ones that end up making the decisions. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to just prepare ourselves for an inevitable CBDC future.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, we're going to wrap up the interview portion before we go on to 21 questions. Can you remind people where they can find you and where they can find the Bitcoin Well?
Yeah, so you'll be able to find me on Twitter. I haven't used it too much, but I'm Bitcoinrad. That's my Bitcoin nickname. It's BITKOINRAD. That's me on X. Better place to follow me on X would be the Bitcoin Well. That's we're on X at the Bitcoin Well. Just spell that as is, and that's probably the best place to follow me. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin, definitely do check out bitcoinwell.com/webinar. I host a monthly webinar there. It's open to the public. We have a lengthy Q&A session where we really encourage everyone to ask their own questions about Bitcoin, because your question about Bitcoin is probably also somebody else's question about Bitcoin. So everyone's going to learn more about that. So yeah, definitely do come over to bitcoinwell.com/webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Konrad.
Thank you.
Keys. Yeah. Man like quakes. Man like who? Yeah. Takes her Bitcoin off exchanges under self-custody. She runs her own node, providing liquidity. Yeah, she got her own keys. She got her own keys. She got her own keys. Yeah, she got her own keys. 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 Yeah, she got her own keys.